On this episode of the podcast, I have with me Mir Ali. He is the head of digital engineering at the Kraft Heinz Company. We're going to be talking about enterprise-wide adoption of Gen AI, generative AI. We're going to try to highlight specifically areas around platform evaluation, ROI. If we can get into some of the legal, regulatory, and maturity planning stuff, we will. If not, we'll have to ask Mir to come back for a second part. But hey, Mir, thanks for coming on. Thanks for being a part of the show.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. And this is a hot topic, and love to share what I've been doing and learning over the past 6 to 8 months.
Awesome. Yeah, I think when we talked, you mentioned, I obviously will share, your LinkedIn post that you had about the topic, and I said I love it because we're hearing a lot about Gen AI. And a lot on the consumer side. I think everyone I've talked to has at least experimented with ChatGPT to see how they can improve their messy emails, and it's working. Lo and behold, it writes a decent email. But that's not really what we're looking at. And I think sometimes we look at enterprises and we're wondering, how does an enterprise start adopting Gen AI? And some of the big pieces are, okay, well, you have to pick the right platform. You have to pick the strategy around it. You have to pick the vendor. How are you going to do that? And then the big ticket is, well, it's going to cost money. How do you justify that? So I guess let's start at the top. Let's talk about the enterprise application of Gen AI, and at least what you're seeing, right? So what that application is, because obviously that, different applications will mean different platform evaluation. So I thought that's probably good context for everyone to understand your point of view.
Yeah. So look, generative AI has taken up the industry, just not CPG where I am, but everyone else with the storm. So everyone is like, oh my God, this is the next best thing, and we all need to be part of it. So in my view and in my, what we are doing, Crafts, right? So we're excited about it, but we're excited, but we want to have some guardrails around it. Right. So this is great. This is going to help. There's a lot of use cases that we're seeing. If we look at from a CPG specific, what we can do on sales, what we can do in supply chain, manufacturing, there's quite a few use cases that we have highlighted. But the forefront of this one is, how do we actually look at this platform? Right. And is this something that is enterprise wide? And how do we do this? This is not something we're going to do once. We're going to do it for one area, but then it needs to quickly scale and be able to do it in another area. So from the overall platform perspective, right? So coming from an engineering background, to me, number one thing is always back of my mind is this a scalable solution? Things that we need to do around it. And is this something that I can guarantee reliability around it? And is this secure? Security actually is a big thing on generative AI. So as we look at the platform, as we look to do this one, and we're looking at, am I dealing with a vendor and a provider that is just new, right, around the block, just showed up. So looking at, from a scalable, security, reliability, and support are some of the things that run right by my mind. And then we look at it. And then the last one is, as we look to do this one, is like, how easy is it to customize this, right? So customization is going to be key. So these are things that we put in as a criteria, and we're looking at it from that perspective. So there's various platforms we're evaluating. I want to restrict, but we're closer to Microsoft in this case, and we are looking to leverage OpenAI, the Azure OpenAI, as our core LLM, within the organization. So these are things at a very high level. Now, as we look at the criteria, but now pricing is going to be an important aspect of it, right? So this is where rubber meets the road, right? So depending on what model you want to use, what's the use case you want to solve, so that all depends on it. So we really need to pay close attention to the pricing model and be very cognizant of it.
I guess let me ask you a question there. So obviously you're in CPG. Everyone knows Kraft Heinz. So it's got a lot of different moving parts. You could immediately start thinking where this is applied to probably dozens and dozens of places, right? How do you go about identifying where to start, right? Obviously, sales seems exciting, marketing seems exciting, supply chain seems obvious. It's like you guys are moving stuff everywhere, making stuff. How do you start looking at, all right, well, the platform could be, decided. That's one thing, right? And we'll talk about pricing and ROI. But when you're looking at area of opportunity, are you just looking at low-hanging fruit? Are you looking strategic? Are you looking at somebody who's more open to the solution? What are some of the factors there?
I think the answer is all of the above that you just mentioned. So it all, at the end of the day, right, it has to align strategic, right? So, I think one of the things we want to talk about, connect this back to, is your data and analytics strategy or your AI strategy. So as part of AI strategies, I think a company, a plug to AI strategies, you should have an AI strategy. And generative AI should be attached to an AI strategy, right? As you look at traditional AI versus generative, we should have a goal as to like how we want to move forward. As I know from a Gartner research recently, it's like 70% of our investment are still traditional AI. So generative AI is coming up. So want to keep that balance, right? So associate and link it back to your AI strategy. As you have the strategy, the second page is, looking at from a stakeholder and business perspective, right? Where is the use case, right? Really looking at a little bit from a deeper perspective to say is like value add, right? Right off the bat is like, is this more on the efficiency side, or is this something really is going to move a needle on the metric side, affect the top line and the bottom line. So looking at that from that lens. And the last thing is like, you want to look at to see is like the maturity of the organization, where they are. If they're still working with Excel and trying to cobble things together, I'm not sure if it's the right place to start with. So you got to look at that maturity level of the organization too. Are there, where they are. So to me, all three of, that you mentioned, needs to be part of your criteria.
A little bit tangential question, because I see this and I'm curious, and just your viewpoint, right? This obviously the industry is still figuring this stuff out. So this solution, your title is the head of digital engineering. On LinkedIn, it shows that you're responsible for product engineering, platform engineering, data engineering. So there's a lot of engineering there. I see a lot of places take their AI strategy and move it under data. Some places are moving it under software engineering, because I think there's different implications, right? I think there's different skill sets coming in, different teams, how this is going to be matrixed. And I'm sure at some point the data people are going to want to take ownership, because they're like, hey, this is based on data. We'll build our own software teams within data. The engineering team is going to be like, we already have infrastructure capabilities. We'll build out. Obviously, it's your, just kind of viewpoint. But how do you see that playing out? Where this sits? Is it a software engineering, focus team doing this? Is it data? Is it matrix? I see you're smiling. So if somebody's listening to me, you're smiling. So obviously it's a bit of a loaded question, maybe.
I do lead the AI strategy for Kraft Heinz North America. It doesn't mean that somebody within the organization that's not directly responsible for data analytics cannot lead it, right? Leading in the sense of somebody driving the vision and the future state and building the roadmap, right? So coming from a background where in the past I've led teams, that are analytics, specifically analytics based. And so I've experienced leading the AI teams from the past and building roadmaps and platforms around it. So from the experience perspective, so in this case, but the part of the team, so I am leading it, but the main players within the team are our head of data science, our head of ML ops team, and then we have people from my team from a platform perspective. So it's a combination of team that is coming together to help drive the strategy. Now, to answer the question on AI strategy, and that's what I was laughing, because just to make sure it's like who's behind driving this. Now, in terms of where it sits in the product, right? AI strategy, you've got a strategy in place, you've got teams in place, right? So what we have is the notion of chapters, right? So you have data science and AI chapter, you have ML ops chapter. So the chapters are there. So what happens is we have product teams. At the end of the day, this technology is going to enable a product. So where it sits in is actually in the product group. So the product is leveraging the tech to enable some capability within the product. So now all of these people from various teams, they're part of this product team, right? So they're fusion. It's a fusion team. So they are driving it. So the answer to your question is it's a product. Product is leveraging an enabler, which is in generative AI, and they're driving it. Now, each of these chapters and areas have a role to play. The data science and AI chapter for us have a role to play in terms of evaluating platform, making sure what we're leveraging, what models, and making sure they're driving the roadmap and the evolution of it, right? And then from a MLOps perspective, making sure we're running this from a scalable, a reliable perspective. From an engineering is bringing all this together and making sure it ties in and connects to the product. So my team does product engineering. So product engineers, leverage this as a service, build those APIs, wrappers around it, connect to the ecosystem and leverage it. So they're making the data science AI team within the product, making it happen. MLOps is making sure it's ready, and our team is leveraging the services, and it's like it's like a Lego blocks. So that's how. So it's, in the end, product needs to use it.
Yeah, I like that. That's actually, I actually align to that a lot more than it being a technical area that owns it, because I think the product is really the beneficiary. I guess to kind of segue into the business side. So I know we're talking about adoption. We talked about platform valuation. We talked about where it sits. We're talking about the product team. Who's the best area of opportunity? Obviously, it's a difficult question. But talk about maybe when you're looking, right? And somebody who, and I'm asking this question, if I'm someone that's sitting in a company going, I'd like to implement something as from AI, I'm not sure how the stakeholder conversation goes, right? They might have experience with some consumer form of AI. They've seen it on TV. They've seen it on the internet. They've seen it on whatever it is. How does that conversation go? And just kind of your experience of, things to kind of watch out for, because obviously, I think I drew the analogy of when we had social media start, everybody thought we were going to have a consumerization of business apps, and people tried to make it look like Facebook. They tried to make it look like Instagram. It did not work, because business apps are business apps for a reason. And now it's a realization that we can make business apps very functional. They just can't be what Facebook was 8-10 years ago. When you're looking at the conversation with business stakeholders and people who lead the product team, how does that look from your perspective?
So, look, I mean, it's a hot technology, AI. Everyone's talking about it. To some degree, business owners and the executives are aware of it. Things come to their table. All right. And different understandings comes with each one of them, right? Somebody gets an article. Mr. CEO, read this, AI is doing. We can help you. Somebody sends that email. Or somebody's pop-up come, AI and all of that. So at the end of the day, there's bombardment of these kind of things at different levels, right? When you go to conferences, when you go to, whether it's LinkedIn. However, what I believe is going to be an important aspect is that internal awareness of driving that, you can call it a data literacy, analytics literacy, or a literacy program internally to ground the team, right? In my view, it will be very difficult to say, hey, we're going to do generative AI. And they're like, what is that? Right? We can't just take 5 people and assume the rest of the organization knows. So there needs to be an internal awareness of it and grounding of what is our point of view on it, and exposing the team to it as like, what does that really mean? And what's the art of possible and where the industry is going? So educating, building that literacy, and then having a conversation to say, hey, what do you think now within your area? What are the opportunities? So doing workshops within the teams, right? It's not twisting, saying that, hey, let's just do this in your area. This is going to be cool. Rather than saying, hey, let's look at it. You now have a grounding on what this tech means. And let's go deep and say, based on this one, where do you see, doing the workshops to really understand. Some of it could be exciting, and for some of them is like, man, it's a noise. I don't really have it. So then you, from there on, so you're striking things off, right? Where and whatnot. So So that's how I look at it from a stakeholder engagement, getting them up to speed, train them a little bit, provide all of that, then go back and sort of handhold and do those workshops, and then bring them to the table and says, okay, from there onwards, so now you have gone through the whole process. Now you have a bunch of pilots. Now you really look at it. Where does this pilots that we have align to our strategy to say it's like which area we're going to drive, right? Whether it's functional areas or core businesses, where does it need to go? So once we understand those, and then from there onwards, it becomes, I'm not going to say easier, but it becomes a good conversation to have. It's like, okay, I believe this is where we see a initial pilots that we need to focus on, and from there on to say it's like what's the impact. It's going to be difficult, right? Initially, sometimes it's an investment that you do in the foundation. You're not going to see it. So understanding the metrics and how you measure, that's going to be a key thing.
You actually teed this up for me. I was actually thinking about this as you're answering that. I'm like, you picked the perfect segue. I mean, you're a pro, so you teed this up for me. So you pick a pilot. How do you know if it'll be successful or not? So a lot of times the company's doing this for the first time. They haven't really have a track record to know success failure. What does success failure look for the pilot to know, okay, we want to put more money into this. We don't want to do this again. What does that look like?
So, right at the end of the day, you're not leaving that on luck, right? It's like, oh my God, let's just hope it works. Right? So hope is, hope is not a thing here to be measured, right?
Yes.
So what we look at when we do a pilot, right? So whether it's you're building this for a efficiency, whether you're building this to drive some automation, or whether you're building for any other reason. So you're looking at to say, if I do this, what needle is going to move? What metric is going to drive, right? So you're looking at the end of the day, you're looking at that metric as to what's going to move, whether it's going to move the sales, it's like, would I increase my, net sales, or whether I decrease some cost, or whether I would increase my NPS from a customer loyalty perspective. So you're looking at those metrics, because once your metric is there, then the measurement becomes easier. The second part of it is the question to ask is like adoption wise, that comes back to the whole adoption thing.
Mm-hmm.
Put a pilot in the users of the pilot. How do we ensure these people are actually using the pilot? That will be the main thing to do, is like, if I rolled it out for 50 people and I'm basing my results based on 50, do you really have that? So that's where the user experience piece comes in. That's where the sort of the training comes into play. And that's where some of these user adoption metrics comes in play. So having those in play, looking at it, because if you're based your assumption on 50 people using it and calculating all of that, and all is like 5 people clicking on it and using it, you're going to fail. So that's why immediately finding out, right? So usually run the pilot for 8 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever it is. But if you see 1 week into it, 2 weeks into it, you're not seeing the movement, right? How many users are there? What time they're spending on what is there some NPS behind this, and do we see anything? So it has to be used, right? So let's say you do this automated email. You would know if somebody used automated email through the APIs that are built in. Do we have 10 API calls, or do you have 100? So, those are things to me are going to be important to do, especially from a measurement perspective, whether is it really paying off or not.
You got me thinking, I was thinking from the standpoint of an executive, we hear a lot about, the media makes a lot about the savings that's going to go into, AI. And if you're an executive, you're in a large company, you're thinking savings is not a bad thing. The area of opportunity to grow revenue is also there. Like, it's going to give you capabilities to grow in segments. Is there a notion that, and I guess we're talking about ROI, we're talking about how to evaluate success, all those things. Is it potentially per different business unit? Like, I could see supply chain, there could be a cost saving, but also, potential revenue opportunity. And it might not be as easy to go, hey, this is going to save us money, it's going to make us money. It might be both type of thing. It seems like different areas might have their own ROI or potential evaluation criteria.
So what was the promise of cloud when cloud came?
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God, you have to go to cloud. It will save you so much money. Cloud. Guess what? It was not the case. If somebody said, I'm doing a cloud transformation because it saved money, that was a wrong principle to be based on. Like, you're not going to save money because you need to be smart in cloud to save money. You need to really, that's why so many companies are thriving, on FinOps, which is the concept of how do we really optimize cloud for that. So same way, it's like, if you are leveraging technology, this is an expensive thing. It's like, if you don't manage this well, you're going to skyrocket the credits, the usage of the tokens, and the cost that's going to run. It's going to skyrocket. So that's why it's like, you have to really, be very particular about it in terms of usage wise, in terms of how you deploy and making cognizant choices and running some kind of calculators on it to say, what would it cost for you to run, and then eventually looking at it, right? So there's certain things, like a model. If a model is used and prompted well, it actually gets better and better and better. But the thing is, you got to keep that in mind. It's like, well, there's an initial investment in it, and don't look at it 1 year. Look at it over a period of 3 years, because it's the same thing. It's like 1 year, it's like you see a cost, but then no return. But then over a period of 2-3 years, then you actually see potentially, I wouldn't say hockey stick, but you would see in that direction. So you have to be cognizant of it. Certain things require investment. So you got to be patient on some of these returns. So technologies like this, it will have an investment upfront, but the returns will be gradual. But at some point, when the adoption is there and is very well integrated, you will see a hockey stick return. This is based on the experience of prior experience. So generative AI wasn't there, so I'm basing this based on other experiences. That this is usually the pattern. So that's why when our executive and on the business case, it's never 1 year. It's over a period of 3 to 5 years that we're looking at it. Minimum 3.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just thinking, how instrumental it is to have somebody who is, heading the AI strategy to be able to get that long-term vision. Because if a company's looking at this going, this seems like a great thing we can try out, that's just ripe for failure. They're inaccurately, trying a project just to proof of concept without the 3-year vision, or the fact that the model is going to learn and you need to be patient with. So I think it's going to be interesting to see, as more and more companies start fleshing out this AI strategy. And I think that the head of AI, from a product perspective, is going to be one of the hottest roles that people are going to try to fill.
Yeah, the product role is going to grow. Area of that whole area of product. You'll see a lot of new roles. 6 months ago, there was no something as prompt engineer.
Yeah.
Now, you have to. And so it's going to evolve, and in tech, this space is just evolving and growing. I'm just amazed.
Absolutely.
If you look at, Copilot, how now it's by default, it's embedded into your day-to-day. Like, if you're not using it, it's like, you're to lose, right? Regardless of what career you're in, people are leveraging. Imagine once it becomes integrated into your day-to-day, it's amazing. Like, if you use Teams, notes are built into it. Meeting and follow-ups are built into it. If you use Microsoft Word, if you have the Copilot, it's just amazing. It's integrated in your day-to-day life, so it's not even a question.
Yeah, I'm excited never to have to think. I'm old enough to know that somebody had to be at a meeting to take notes and send out a summary to everyone to make sure that everyone was aware of what was said. So that'll be something that I'll be happy nobody in the future will have to deal with. But absolutely.
So one, example, something comes to my mind. So back when I started development, so there was no concept of type ahead, right? So when you click on it, it's like, you would have to, I would actually always have API documentation open, right? I will quickly search like, what is that on, hash or maps or anything. And then, oh, okay, now I need to pass this now. This is amazing. Now somebody I tell, it's like, oh man, I used to look up every time, to point I memorized. So now when you go to interviews, they ask you actually a question. I said, tell me that method, what does it take in and all that. I was like, man, now if you ask that question, you crazy? It doesn't even make sense because it's just there. Right? You don't even ask. So now you're still used to it. So that's how Copilot down the road is like, if you're not using it, it's like, what? So it just times, it's evolving.
I was going to say, I know, there's a whole couple of segments of talking about legal and regulatory components and planning for maturity. Can we have you back to do a part 2, maybe, to cover those areas?
This is an exciting topic. I will be there every time you ask me.
Awesome, man. I know you got to get back to. You got a lot on your plate. I appreciate you taking the time out to do this and joining us. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you so much. Take care.
Awesome. That's it for the episode. We'll be back again, different guest, different topic. Until then, if you found the episode useful, share it with somebody else. That's how the podcast has grown. Like it, subscribe, leave a review. Tell us, what we can do better. I love the feedback. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.